Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Today's show is Why is the Left Afraid to Critique Islam? My name is Jedediah. Today I'm co hosting this show with my sisters, Divine and Afnan. And we also have our beloved, very special guest today is Miss Elaine Ellinger. We had her before. Uh, Good afternoon, Miss Elaine.
Wow, my goodness, what a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
I always like to remind our viewers that Miss Elaine Ellinger is the author of the Civilizational Reckoning, Understanding the Threat and Reclaiming the Future. I highly encourage everyone to educate themselves on this critical issue as understanding the threats facing us today is more important than ever. You can get this remarkable book right now on Amazon, I'm sure. Um, Miss Elaine, I'm always excited to talk to you because most of your public work, at least from where I've been sitting, is about Islam, but not just about sitting it trying to understand the five pillars better. It's more of an expository job that you are doing. You're trying to expose the world to exactly what is going on within Islam and what they actually mean versus what they say publicly, or what their PR or like public relations firms do for them. And even as we sit here right now, Elaine, there are people that are being targeted in Nigeria, Sudan, and Mozambique. There are Christians that are being beheaded, raped, burned
Yes,
alive, all kinds of different things by Muslims simply because they are Muslims and simply because the other people are Christians. Then and then we have a bunch of people trying to explain that away. And so I guess let's talk a little about what seemed to be a lot of your life's work and into what we are even seeing in modern day.
well, it's odd that we start out talking about people being beheaded because just a couple of months ago I was in contact with someone who's in Uganda, and they're not that far from the border. And uh, we've been in contact for a couple of years at least, and really a lovely person. And near the refugee camp, someone had been beheaded and their motorcycle stolen. And of course, there's nothing to say that it was a Muslim that did that, but why were they beheaded and their hands and feet were injured? And I don't very often talk about any scripture other than Islam, because that's my purpose, is to teach people about it. But when you speak about beheading, I can't help but think about Revelation 24, 20 verse 4. And I don't usually talk about this kind of thing, but if you look at Revelation 20, verse 4, it talks about the Christians being beheaded. And I ask you, who else is doing that? No one else is doing that. And people aren't paying attention to this. Um, in Western countries, you go to the Christian churches, and honestly, they don't want to hear about it. They say that every faith is valid, and they're all good. And but is Islam just a faith? It's not really. You look at it's not. That's all there is to it. You see what's happening in Iran right now, and what it is, clearly, is a religious system of governance. It's a religious system that has state control. And that is what a theocracy is. Now, the West does not understand that. They only understand war when it is declared by a nation state. They do not understand that the doctrine itself is a declaration of war. And I say that in my book. It couldn't be more clear. The highest deed is jihad, and integrating with non-Muslims is absolutely forbidden, because it's very very hard to kill someone that you love, isn't it? So if you integrate with people and you start to love those people, it makes it much more difficult to fulfill the obligations that the Quran and the Hadith demand that Islam triumphs over all other beliefs. In the end, there is nothing but Islam, and that Christ will return to break the cross, kill the pigs, and lead the Muslims in prayer. That they are so naive. They are so incredibly naive, and they just don't want to hear this. And because they don't pay much attention to scripture themselves, they think no one else does. Well, that's simply not permitted in Islam, is it? You either get in line or you get mowed down. And in the West, there are a number of people who are practicing Islam in a very nominal way, and they think that this will continue forever, and it will not. They need to pay attention for their own sakes. They're Muslim, but think of where this is going. Learn about what your doctrine really says, because so many of them don't.
So can you give us how can we access your public work? How can we get to
Well, I would love to do that. Is it okay if I share for a moment? I'm not sure exactly.
Go ahead. Yeah, that's what we want. Go ahead.
How do I go about that? Oh, there, I see. Now I've made it bigger. I was looking at this little teeny box. All right, now I've got it covering my screen. And now how do I go about sharing here? I'm not sure.
I don't know, but like if you can tell us your YouTube channel, anything that we can get access to, like if somebody can help her. I don't know how to share.
Yes, do you have anybody that can show how I can share screen for a minute? Because that would really be helpful. Is there anybody backstage there that could help with this? Advanced visual effects. I don't see it.
Let's try to figure this out at the end, but can you tell us the name of your channel?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll do that. Okay. All right. If you go to YouTube and look for Perspectives on Islam, it's called Perspectives on Islam. Of course, these are non-Muslim perspectives on Islam. Everybody has a perspective. Well, I have the non-Muslim perspective on Islam, because more than half of the doctrine is actually about the non-Muslim. We should certainly know what it says. So it's called Perspectives on Islam from a non-Muslim. And if you look for that channel, my name is right there, Elaine Ellinger, and it says there, Perspectives on Islam from a non-Muslim. That is, if you search my name on YouTube, you'll find it as well. And then if you click on podcasts, you'll discover that I have read my entire book into a podcast. And this is specifically so that people in other languages can read the book. Because shortly after my book was published, I was contacted by a woman in Belgium, and she had ridden the tram into, now, Belgium was 100% European. I wandered all over Europe in 1974. All right. And it was lovely. There was no EU then. And anyone who thinks that the EU has done something wonderful for Europe is very much mistaken. Europe was wonderful. Europe was European. And, if you went to Germany, it was very German. If you went to Switzerland, it was very Swiss. And you could feel the culture that had developed over centuries of these people. And they were happy people. And, and you were safe. Everywhere I went, I was safe. But, the way that it's changed so much now, that now I've gotten off track, like how I started talking about the EU and what they're doing now. But anyway, okay, so back to my book. Oh, yes, okay. So now there's all of these people who have come who follow Islam, and many of them are not bothering to learn the language at all, okay? So the French people don't have access to the Islamic doctrine. They don't know what it says. They're extremely confused, upset, and frightened at what they see happening, these very fast changes around them. So right after I published the book, and this is actually what we were going to talk about today anyway, is how, people are being affected around the world and what's happening to human rights. So she was riding the tram into Brussels, and she was the only woman on the tram that wasn't wearing a hijab, and one of them kicked her. And as you know, in Egypt, I have a very dear Coptic Christian friend from Egypt, one of my best friends. And she told me about how riding the bus, if you're not veiled, you're poked with pins, you're kicked, you're elbowed, and just
We
treated
being
very
thrown by
badly.
stones. We also, like, as we walk, I would used to walk in the street, be thrown by stones, just not because
Exactly,
not wearing hijab.
exactly, exactly. Well, the
And they
hadith
call you
say,
names. They call you
yeah,
names too on the street.
yes, yes. And the hadith says this, that you're the lowest of the low, that if you're walking down the street and you come across, a Christian or a Jew, that you're to push them to the side of the street. That is what the doctrine says. This is not the human rights that the Western world, that enlightenment has brought us. We are going right back into the dark ages, of tribalism. And it just shocks me that the West is going along with this. Anyway, so she got, that all beliefs are equal. They are not. And I don't even look at it as a belief, because it is primarily a system of governance. That's what Sharia is, and it's inseparable from Islam.
Exactly.
So
That's actually my next question, because, as you know, Islam doesn't need anyone to demonize it. It does that all on its
itself,
own.
it
Yeah,
does.
through its own text,
Yes.
laws, and the societal practices, and yet society at large treat it as if it were Christianity, harmless,
Yeah,
benign, even
yeah.
admirable in some cases.
Well,
What's
well,
even more striking is the attitude of many young liberal women, mostly unmarried or whatever, who are Islam adjacent, or at least soft toward it. They scold conservatives about this supposed handmaid's tale society that they are imagining, denying the ongoing oppression of minority and women in the Islamic world today. Yet
mhm.
they themselves enjoy freedom denied to women under Islamic law. They aren't wearing burqas. They have rights, opportunities, and autonomy, but still they excuse or sympathize with Islam. I honestly struggle to see any explanation of this outside of demonic influence,
They
because
do
nothing
a lot.
else
Yeah, no, they
accounts of
do.
such blind, willful moral inversion. So, can you give us any explanation of this
Well,
at all?
they do a lot more than just, enjoy the West, and I'm talking Muslims now. I'm talking the people who like to call themselves moderate Muslims. Many of them are doing a grave disservice, not only to, the rest of the West, but to themselves, because, that is straight up denial. Just because they don't know or don't want to believe how it ends up. The thing is that many of them are gathering a great deal of support. And, for instance, there's an imam called Tawhidi, and he met recently with members of the Canadian Parliament, and the cameras were rolling, and he was very theatrical with his hands, and you watch him, and it's a performance. If you go to his homepage, it's a booking page, and they get a tremendous amount of support. And what are they doing? They're misdirecting. They're saying, oh, look at the Muslim Brotherhood over there. Well, even if you did look at the Muslim Brotherhood over there, do you think that they're going to start arresting MPs or professors? Well, they're certainly not. I mean, it's a wild goose chase, and it's irrelevant, because it's the doctrine. It's not the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not, it's not any of those groups that we need to worry about. They are simply manifestations of the doctrine itself. It's the doctrine. If something isn't done to expose the doctrine, stop the doctrine, educate people about what we are allowing to be taught in our schools. There are literally thousands of madrasas now in the UK. Are they insane? Anyway, back to my book, because I never finished. That is the actual book.
Hold on, Elaine, hold on. Send me like whatever you want to share on the camera, because in the backstage they said you can send it to me and then I'll send it to them. If you want to like share your website, your YouTube, or other stuff that need to be shared.
Well, yeah, okay, all right. I can just give that to you. I'm not even sure how to give that to you. I don't see a place that I can do that here. Video file share. Oh, I found share screen. Share screen.
Right, but we need to
Okay,
also
we'll actually be able to. That will be easier. Okay. I want to finish
cover
about the
of your-
Belgian woman. So she got hold of me and said, can you do it in French, please? So we worked very hard together, the two of us, since my book came out in September. And we just finished publishing the third because French is so much bigger. But we had to make this doctrine available to French people. And so much of the doctrine is not only in my book, it's explained in my book, and it's related to everyday life so people can see how it plays out in the world around them. It's not just something in a book somewhere, it's in real life and how it affects them. So anyway, so we translated into French. The third volume was just published. And I had a nephew get hold of me and say, I don't have time to read. I only do podcasts. And, I listen because I have to drive 6 hours a day. And then there's people like in Romania or Albania. How are they going to get this information if it's not in their language? So I made a big project and I read the entire book into 40 episodes. So it is not only a podcast on Spotify, I am releasing one a week on YouTube so that people have a chance to read it. Because on YouTube, if you want to read it in another language, then you need to sit down and have subtitles and read it, but it's there for anyone who wants it. So should I go ahead and share screen now and just share these little things?
We just need to see the cover of your book first, and then you share screen. So we can see the book, the cover.
Well, that's one of the things I was going to share. I've got it on the...
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. All right, so we'll go to, I don't think, oh, share, what do you want? Okay, so select, I think, window. No, I think entire screen. No, I think I want a window. Yes, I want a window. I want that window. Okay. Okay, yes, this is it. Okay, so we'll start with, this is my website. And it's just called perspectivesonislam.info. And on the main page are links to all of the foundational doctrine. So anybody wants to know what it says, you don't have to go hunting around. Just go to my page. This is the authentic doctrine, not touched in any way. This is their own doctrine. I don't touch it. I have a little video here, very short, 5 minutes, showing you how to search it yourself. And then on this page here, resources, it's divided. You can click to politics, history, law enforcement, women, slavery, apostates. All of these things are affected by Islam. So you just have to click on one and it will go to that section. And then there are free videos. Some of these are books. Some of these, like The English Woman in Egypt, Letters from Cairo. It's an archived book from 1845 about the slaves. A lot of people think, oh, well, slavery was the transatlantic thing. My goodness gracious. Slavery has been going on in Islam for 14 centuries now, and it is still going on in the markets. There were all sorts of white slaves, black slaves, redheads, every kind of slave you can imagine when she was in Cairo in 1845. That's not long ago. And, people want to imagine. So, and this is by a friend of mine. So there's huge number of resources on all these different topics here. Now, this is my YouTube channel, and the videos, okay, these are videos that I have made about different subjects. There's one here that you might be interested in, Islam and the Unbelievers, Christians, Jews, and others. So, but recently I made the podcast. Like I said, there's 40 episodes. So you click on podcasts and they're being released one a week. So four have been released now. And as you can see, we've got Albanian here. So you can watch it in the language of your choice and read the whole book that way. And then it's also on Amazon in English, A Civilizational Reckoning, Understanding the Threat. And it's also available in French, and you can get it in Kindle. So there's all those things. And, the main thing now, I'm trying to stop share. Did I just
You
stop
did.
share?
Yes, you did. So,
Okay, now I just need to find you again.
oh, okay. You're here.
Am I? That's great. Okay. So I
Okay.
just closed all those tabs and there you are again. Wonderful. Yeah. So yeah. So I just wanted to say about the book, like what it is that makes it different, besides the fact that it exposes the doctrine. It explains it in very easy terms. You know, I want to communicate. So I always say everything as simply as humanly possible. But what it relies on is human rights, to understand human rights. And in fact, there's one section of the book that simply compares the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It goes through all the articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it shows how Islam contradicts all of them. And in fact, Islam has its own Declaration of Human Rights. And here, you know, since 1948 at the UN, everybody thinks that Islam has followed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it never has. It never adopted it. And it has its own, the Cairo Declaration, which follows Sharia, which is what they follow in Iran, which is what they follow in Afghanistan. And these people, the largest, wealthiest, most influential voting bloc at the UN, have been involved in the UN, guiding the UN for all of these years. And we wonder why the West is such a mess. Well, you've got all these naive people at the UN who don't understand anything about Islam, and they're being led by the nose to make all of these terrible mistakes, so that they're losing their own society and endangering the lives of their people. But the book ends with concrete legislation, and I know it is in the hands of several politicians. Of course, I won't say where or who, but in very diverse locations, really. So it's getting into the right hands. And what it does is it simply says we need to protect human rights and have a threshold. And the threshold must mean that in order to enjoy legal rights, I mean, people can believe whatever they want, but in order to enjoy legal rights, you know, charitable status, you know, finance, all of these things that Islam takes advantage of, that a certain threshold must be met. And that must meet, you know, with constitutional requirements and universal human rights. And the only one to fail is Islam. The Hindus don't need to worry. The Copts don't need to worry. The Jews don't need to worry. You know, the Baha'i, nobody needs to worry, because nobody else has Sharia. Nobody else has a belief system that wants to seize control of government and is itself a form of governance. I mean, freedom of belief is protected, but benefits and exemptions are granted at the discretion of the state. They are not a divine right, and they cannot be extended to systems that deny those same rights to others. So the legislation that and how to adjudicate it, all the background needed to present it is at the back of my book.
Exactly. So, Divine, would you like to add something to this? Divine?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, I was doing something.
Yeah, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I actually didn't follow like the last part.
Like
I
we're
didn't
talking
follow.
about like how like the West are like you know the liberals people today in the West would like treat Christianity as if it's Islam,
Yeah,
acting like if Islam benign, like not a problem
I
at
know.
all. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
actually, my opinion in this will never gonna change, because I know like all the bad ones are in one side against the other side, which is people of the book, or like the children of God, which are Christian and Jews. That's why they're all against them. Like you see them, they're not even like Muslim and non-Muslim, whoever like against God, they're all like the followers of the devil. And this is the unholy father for all of them, like either like uh what you call like gays, lesbians, like people who are supporting like the miscarriage or like this kind of stuff. or like thieves, criminals. They all against Christian and Jews. People who attack the Jews are not even like Muslim. Like Muslim, they attack them and they have their own reason that their God told them to kill Jews and Christian. But even like people who are not Muslim are with them, and these are the criminals that they just like do it because they are evil.
Well, we were
So
going to talk about the liberals today, but it's not.
yeah, that's liberals.
Yeah.
They all
Yeah,
fall
well,
under one category, the
mhm.
liberal or the left side. And I have like a verse even from the Bible to say, like Jesus, when he comes back, like in the second coming, he said he's gonna put the good people on the right and the bad people on the left. So they picked it like where they belong to.
Oh,
They
dear.
belong to the left. They all belong to the left. Criminals, terrorists, Muslims. Muslim like has everything. They're terrorists. Like if they follow Islam, I know like some Muslim are good because they don't follow Islam. They don't know anything about Islam. That's why they're good. Not they're good because they follow Islam and the Islam teaching is making them good. And some people are just they interpret the Islam wrong. No, if you understand Islam very good or very well, then you have to be a terrorist. You have no other choice but to be a terrorist and to be full of hate for all non-Muslims, because it's by verses. The doctrine of Islam, as Elaine said, is to hate all non-Muslim and to be a terrorist, to kill. If you're not a killer, you're not gonna go to heaven. Their heaven, the Islamic heaven, it's different
Well,
than our like.
I wouldn't say that. What the doctrine says is that there is a group, okay, a group of my ummah who will fight for the truth meaning the Quran and Hadith, the truth, the Sharia, okay, who will fight for that till the end of times. That is what the West ignores. But you have to remember that that is the law, all right? So when push comes to shove, there are people who a few years ago in Canada were very much against what's happening now, Muslims, and now they're all for it because, like I said, like you either get in line or you get mowed over. So they might want to hang on to their Western lifestyle, but once Islam has the upper hand, that's not an option anymore, and they're very naive if they think that it will be.
Yeah, because they're gonna enslave them. Like Islam does not accept anyone like who have like who doesn't accept Islam. So either to accept Islam or to be their enemy, they enslave you, or to pay jizya.
They believe in supremacy of Islam, like they have to
Yeah,
be superior to you no matter what.
al-a'lun.
Yeah,
And it's the only religion is accepted by God.
yeah,
Islam is the only one. Yep.
exactly. So, Miss Elaine, the last time you were here with us, we learned that your interest in Islam began in 1983 when you met your Baha'i friend who had fled Iran as a refugee during the revolution. Since then, you have spent decades searching, writing, and speaking about growing influence of Sharia in non-Islamic countries, from the perspective, of course, of the non-Muslim. And I'm sure you have also maintained close friendship with Iranians over the years, giving you a firsthand and deeply informed understanding of what has been unfolding in Iran from 1979 revolution to the present day. What are we witnessing now is inevitable boiling over of that long simmering pressure, people rising up to free themselves from the Iranian regime. So, could you help us understand what was happening in Iran during those years, developments that much of the Western world remain largely unaware of today?
Oh yeah, I'd love to because I care very deeply about Iran, and like you say, it was the first awareness that I had. I later learned more about Islam and realized it wasn't my first encounter with Islam, but it was certainly my first awareness of what Islam is. And of course, initially, I had no understanding at all. And I would study what was happening with people. And it was only after 9/11 that, bombing the Trade Center in New York, where they now have a Muslim mayor, and, they lit all the buildings green to honor Muhammad. And I'm thinking, they're absolutely insane. Then the thing is that, each generation seems to forget what the generation before learned. And so that's when I started to study the doctrine and realized that was the root. That was the root, absolutely. And unless people understand that and do something about that, it's a parallel system of governance, and it remains that way because the Muslims are forbidden from forming serious friendships, with non-Muslims. And, there's so many examples of that. But for Iran, it says that, and this is the Constitution of the Islamic Republic, it says that all civil, now, got to hear all this one at a time, civil, penal, financial, economic, administrative, cultural, military, political, and other laws must be based on Islamic criteria. People just don't understand that all of that falls under the category of what we are calling religion. Now, that is clearly governance. Nothing could be more clear that is 100% governance. And not only that, for 14 centuries, one of the pillars of Islam is to pay zakat. And people think of it as alms, and it is not charity. It is a system of taxation. There are 8 categories, and there are a lot of different groups that are authorized to collect this zakat. But it is really a tax. If you look at those 8 categories, they include, money for the people who are collecting it, for military, for jihad, some for the poor, for bringing people to Islam. You could call it public relations. There's 8 categories, and it's just, people just don't look at Islam like it's a system of governance, but it is. So I've told you that, okay. And it is just like the Cairo Declaration, like I was saying at the UN, which also says that it has to be everything that they are doing at the UN in the Cairo Declaration. It must be in accordance with Islamic values and principles. Now, their original declaration specifically said in Articles 24 and 25 that their concept of human rights must follow Sharia. Well, there was pressure from the EU and a report that they were not very happy with what was happening in these Sharia councils that were springing up all over Europe, all over the UK, where there's a parallel system of law clearly happening in regards to contracts and inheritance and all sorts of things. So they're saying, well, we're not very happy about that. And we're not very happy about this Cairo Declaration and Sharia. So they changed the wording. And they took out the word Sharia and they put in Islamic values and principles, that the Charter of Medina and the last sermon of Muhammad are core, okay, to their Islamic principles, which is Sharia. But now if you go to AI, it'll say, oh, isn't it wonderful? They revised their human rights in 2020 to make it more in line with Western Europeans' concepts of human rights. They haven't done that at all. They just took the word Sharia out. That's how ignorant we are, incredibly ignorant. But you were asking about Iran and who's there. Well, there's so many people, and I was watching a video a couple of years ago, and it was the president of Iran's wife speaking about the hijab and saying how, it's their culture, and but it is also law, and that it is political, that it has always been political. And that, of course, it is enforced because it is the law. But, it's enforced on everyone, not just Muslims. It's enforced on everyone, has to wear a hijab. So in Iran, you have Persians, Azeris, Kurds, Balochs, Arabs, and Arabs don't fare that well in Iran because of the Sunni connection, even if they're Shia, they're too close. Anyway, the Turkmen, there's Armenians, Assyrians, Zoroastrians, Jews, Baha'is, and there's indigenous groups, Lurs, Gilaks, and somebody called Mazarandaris. And I never say that word right, but these are indigenous groups. Now, culture is something that evolves with the people. You know, it's like you make your soup the way your mother made it, and then you add something, and then the next one adds something extra, you know, and this is culture, how culture develops. It develops organically, and it is an expression of the people. Sharia is not an expression of the people. It is an expression of Muhammad. Every word in the Quran came out of his mouth. All of the hadith are about the life of Muhammad, the sunnah of Muhammad, the example that Muslims are all supposed to follow to this day, all came from one man, Muhammad. And they like to say, okay, well, it was a revelation, you know, through Gabriel, and it all came out of his mouth. And there's, you know, nothing else like this. And it was enforced. And, you know, the hijab wasn't even enforced in the 13 years that he was in Mecca. It was after about 5 years after his migration to Medina that the hijab was enforced. So it wasn't originally there. And one of his compatriots, I think it was Umar, anyway, was very proud of himself. And he said, well, Allah has agreed with me in 3 points because he had been pushing Muhammad. Yeah,
yes,
he had been.
Yes.
Yeah, he had been pushing Muhammad to require the hijab, so he would know who was a slave and who was Muhammad's wife, because he had so many wives. I mean, altogether he had 13, not all at once, but altogether 13. You know, and you didn't want to go assaulting Muhammad's wife, so they better wear hijabs. But they set the example for all women, so now it is required. And so you have all of these people.
But do you know the slave woman, how she should cover from? Do you know her covering from where to where?
Yeah, I think it's from her waist down to her knees.
Belly button to her knee. So
yeah.
You are not allowed to cover more than that. So actually, in the 1800s and stuff, we have pictures of slaves were topless because that's. And if you try to cover yourself, you'll get beaten because they.
Omar also.
Like Omar, he beat.
They did beat the woman for like uncovering like her
or covering her
the
head.
top or the head.
Well, you know, people know about Mark Twain, and Mark Twain's first book was actually called Innocents Abroad, and it was actually the very first world cruise as sort of something for the wealthy to do. And of course, he wasn't wealthy, but a newspaper sponsored him to go and send back bulletins about how this trip was progressing. And people enjoyed his writing so much that he later took them all and organized them into a single book called The Innocents Abroad. And in it, he speaks about this. So Mark Twain was not that long ago. We're still quoting, you know, Mark Twain. He said, common sense isn't that common. And he was certainly right, you know. But he wrote about seeing the slaves, you know, and their breasts exposed. He wrote about a story in Egypt where the mosque apparently had a clock, and the clock was broken, and there was none of the Muslims who were able to mend the clock. And there was a very good clock mender in the city, but rather than allow him to go into the mosque, which wasn't allowed, you know, the Kafirs are not allowed to go into the mosque, although they're bringing them in now in kind of public relations things, but eventually that's going to change as well. And when they're brought in, it's not exactly to hear the Friday sermon, is it? But anyway, so, and I mean, they're bringing in little kids from like Catholic kindergartens, and I've seen in Italy where they've got them down on the prayer mats, which is just ridiculous, you know, to influence little children that way. But anyway, back to the story about Egypt. So they said, well, we can bring an ass into the mosque, so we can bring a kafir, a non-Muslim, into the mosque as a clockmaker, and he has to come in on all fours. So the man had to crawl into the mosque to repair the clock and crawl out because he was so low he had no right to be in there except as an animal. Now that's in Innocents Abroad. Anybody can read it, you know, but you know, and to get back to Iran and today. So, like I say, the hijab is mandatory for everyone. And a friend of mine
And that
was
wasn't before 79, right? Like, I want to know the
no,
change.
no,
Exactly.
that's the thing. You know, this parallels my own life because when I was a young woman in my 20s, the women in Iran looked just like me. You know, they were out wearing bathing suits and just, you know, going to the library and having coffee with their girlfriends and going dancing. Dancing is forbidden. There was a couple that they were dancing, a man and a woman dancing together, and they've been in prison for years now because they posted this a little video they made of themselves, and it was discovered. Everyone is afraid. They are surveyed all of the time. So this friend of mine was over there a couple of years ago, and he's originally from Iran, and he was making a video, and the fellow who was with him had the camera, and a woman jumped in front of them and removed her hijab. And his friend stopped filming immediately, and he said we could get in trouble for that. So, you know, I can't film that. A couple of days later, my friend, my very good friend, gets a knock on the door, 10 o'clock at night. It's the police. They seize his equipment. They take him to the police station. They tell him he has 48 hours to get out of Iran or he's going to be in prison. He didn't ask any questions. He just tried to book a plane. He got the last seat out. So that's what happens if you go there and you film something they don't want you to film. So anyway, so that's Iran. So you have the mandatory hijab, you have mandatory segregation of the sexes in all public life. This includes buses, universities, stadiums. You've got Ramadan fasting for everyone, okay? This isn't just for Muslims because, like I say, it is a system of governance that has state control. Islam is a system of governance. It is Sharia. And once they have state control, then they impose it. And so the entire population has to, and, you know, the question is, well, you know, they're not doing that in this Islamic country or that Islamic country. One, you don't know everything they're doing in those countries. For instance, somebody was just talking about how wonderful Indonesia is. Well, in some places there, you can be fined the equivalent of 500 pounds and imprisoned for 2 years for missing Friday prayer. And you're never going to be able to repair your church. So, you know, don't tell me how wonderful it is in Indonesia. You know, it all depends on, you know, how long are you there? Who are you talking to? How much do you really know about what's going on? But the point is, the law is always there. The Sharia can always be enforced and justified, if not by the state, then by a mob. And as long as it is consistent with the Quran and what Muhammad has said, people will turn a blind eye to it. You know, we know that people are killed every single day. There is mob violence. I saw mob violence just a couple of weeks ago. A young Hindu man was accused of blasphemy. He was burned in the street. And this is Bangladesh. They tied him to a tree and burned a young man alive. And you know, a couple of years ago, the same thing happened to a woman. She had been critical of her classmates because they were talking about Islam all the time. And they burned her alive. They killed her. So there is compulsory religious education as well. And just one more thing about Ramadan. A couple of years ago, there was a Hindu in Pakistan who had his restaurant open on during Ramadan for Hindus to eat. Okay, and he was killed by a mob. So you know, it's very violent. So there's, you know, and moderates here want to deny it. I'm sorry. The doctrine supports it. If the doctrine supports it, they can do it, and they do. And they need to open their eyes and look around the world and don't imagine that because, you know, we're living in a democracy that this is going to last forever. If Islam gains political control, which it is clearly doing in the US. I mean, another friend of mine in Iran a few months ago, before this latest, you know, revolution, he said that oh dear, where did I go? Oh yes, he said he was talking about their life and what had happened to them, and believe me, it is a horror. He had lost his job in 2024 because of his political views. He is a professional man. He says, you can't believe how we're treated. And years ago, his uncle had been shot. And now people are talking about they're demanding that if they want the body returned, they have to pay for the bullets, as if this is something new. This is not something new. Years ago, his uncle was shot by the IRGC. They didn't return the body. The children have no idea. They never saw their father again. They don't know where the grave is. And the IRGC demanded if they wanted the money back, they had to pay for the bullets. So, and that's ransom. And, you know, ransom is in the doctrine as well. So there's compulsory education. It's, you know, Islam is taught in all of the schools. There's no criticism allowed of Islam or Sharia. And they have the second highest rate of execution in the world. They figure since 1979, at least 20,000. And I can't even guess the numbers that have been slaughtered just recently. There's no proselytizing by non-Muslims. So if you're a Christian or Jew, if you speak about your faith publicly, it is extremely dangerous. You're likely to get arrested. And of course, everything is closed for Friday. The morality police target everyone. And, you know, this is something I'd like to mention, that, you know, there are certain personality types. And I used to study psychology. That was my major. And frankly, I was pretty darn good at it. And I don't claim to be any kind of a professional at all, but some things are extremely well known. And one of them is what's called the authoritarian personality. So there are people who just love to enforce the rules. And there are some occupations that those are the people that you want to hire. So there's psychological testing to determine if someone has an authoritarian personality, which means that they show deference to authority. Okay, they don't question authority, and they implement authority. So they are the people who, you know, enforce, like police and things like that, enforce rules. Well, that's who you want in the morality police. But there's a large population of those people everywhere. It is not uncommon. It's like 20% of the population has an authoritarian personality to some extent. So the people are there and they will be used. So when you get an Islamic state, there are people, they don't have to be mentally ill to be administering this. They simply have to be authoritarian personalities who follow Islam. And then they're going to execute Sharia. That's all there is to it. So, you know, like I already mentioned, the dancing is illegal, singing, you know, women performing. There was a woman performing not long ago. She was arrested because she had performed publicly without a veil. If they perform publicly, it's only supposed to be very small groups of women. There's people killed for apostasy. There's constant censorship. And anyway, my friend that I was just mentioning, frankly, I think he's probably gone now. I'm very careful what I say about him because I don't want to identify him in any way in case he is still alive. But I honestly have my doubts, because he said to me that he was sure that they were being followed, they were being monitored, and so he probably was arrested. And he also read my book. When my book was published, he was the first person I gave it to, because he knew I was writing and he wanted to read it so badly. There was no way to get the book in Iran, so I just sent it to him directly. And
wow, no wonder we see actually women in Iran for practicing resisting by dancing in the street, and also that woman who got killed just because her bangs were showing from underneath her hijab in Iran.
Mahsa Amini,
Yeah. Divine, would you like to add something to this? Okay, Divine. Afnan, would you like to add something to this?
I think I've put them to sleep.
No.
No.
This isn't
I was
good.
just talking. We have like another friend coming, so I was just talking to him, and I sent him like the link. But yeah, I was following with you, Elaine, and I know Like when you spoke about the hijab, even Khadija, she stayed with Muhammad 25 years without wearing the hijab. So
That's right.
this was the order. This was the order of Omar.
Mhm.
Omar did that because he was harassing one of the prophet's wives.
Yeah.
Sauda, he went after her
Sada,
when she
yeah.
went to, yeah, she went to, like, I don't know what to say, like,
Go bathroom.
but yeah,
Relieve herself
to the
in the
bathroom.
evening.
Yeah, leave her
bathroom in the
in the
desert, like,
wilderness.
and like,
That's it.
yep. And then he was harassing her, and he said, "Oh, we saw you, we know you," stuff like that. And then he went to the prophet and he said, "You need to cover your wives because like everybody like talk to them or like see them or stuff." He was talking about himself actually harassing her, but the prophet didn't care. And then he has to come up with like one of the verses to like make the hijab as like something to impose on like his wives. In the beginning they thought it's just for his wife, and then they made it for everybody except like the slaves, that they have to be uncovered. And people come and say, "Oh, Islam covered the woman." No, they didn't cover the woman. They just cover their own and to harass other women. Like they went after women. If they try to cover themselves, they're not allowed because they're not equal to the Muslim women. So like as like Jedediah said, like she has to be uncovered from like the waist up, like her breast has to be shown. And we have
From the
other
waist
hadiths
down.
talking about
From the waist down.
terrible
to the knees.
hadiths, no, to be covered from the waist down, but to be uncovered, like from the waist to like
From
to the
from
head.
the head to the waist.
Yep. So what kind of covering, what kind of like giving like the woman respect by doing this? So this is one of like the stuff that you spoke about. And also you were speaking about like either mobs or government, like they're
Yeah.
like the mobs taking like the law into their hands. This is now happening in other countries, like it's like in all Muslim countries, but some countries are not showing it enough to the international community, but they're doing it to the Christian. They're doing it even for the atheists. They're doing it for all non-Muslims. And I see in Egypt, we're gonna talk about Egypt when like we finish with Iran. Also in Iran, there is a call from someone inside the country is calling for help, and there's other countries are not supporting like the Iranian people, and like Italy, Spain, and France. The three of them are not supporting the Iranian people, and they're siding with the devil, like the terrorists, like the what's his name, Khamenei or Khamenei?
Yeah.
I don't know like his
Hominy.
name,
Hominy,
but
I believe. Hominy.
Khamenei, yeah.
They all sound the same, don't they? They're very similar. Yeah.
Yeah, and they said Iraq is what you call Iraq and Egypt and China, other countries. There is like a bunch of countries also are not supporting the Iranian people. They don't want to like stop the massacre in
Well, you know,
Iran.
people don't even want to believe that, you know, this is a religious leader. I'm sorry, it is. You know, it's like the Ayatollah. He was a religious leader. He wrote religious texts all the time. He called for the assassination of Salman
Trump
Rushdie.
before.
And just recently, the Ayatollah called for the assassination of Trump and Netanyahu. How do you call these priests? Okay, how do they call them priests? For heaven's sakes, they really need to understand that. I was just looking here to find the name yesterday. I watched a video. A friend of mine in Europe sent it to me. It's a good friend of hers. Her name is Sabatina James, and she's an ex-Muslim. And I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she started an organization back in 2006 to try and help Muslim women who are trying to, you know, escape forced marriage. And you know, we'll get into that subject later. But you know, so many of them are killed, and you know that the West is just ignoring all of this and pretending this is an ordinary belief is just outrageous.
Exactly.
Did you see it on LinkedIn, Eileen? Today, they said like Iraq, Egypt, China, Cuba, South Africa, Qatar, and Pakistan, members of the UN Human Rights Council, refused to endorse a request for urgent session on Iran's massacre. And
Yeah,
they
that's
said, then
actually
if you
my
are silent on Iran, you are helping the world's worst regime to cover up a massacre.
Well,
This
apparently
is
the
a post we
EU
have
has condemned them, but no, I didn't see that. And if you would send that to me, because you know I'm hours and hours behind the rest of you in terms of, you know, the
world.
Yeah, I'll
world
send it to
learning.
you.
Yeah.
I did like a repost for it, but I'll send it to you in like the private.
Yeah, please do. I'd love to see that.
Wh-
Thank you.
which actually bring me to my next question, that the last news I heard on TV, that Iran's top police official issued an ultimatum on last Monday, warning that protesters must turn themselves in or face the full force of the law. Tens of thousands of protesters have reportedly been swept up in a nationwide manhunt, while regime forces patrolling the streets have threatened to shoot anyone who goes outside. And despite an ongoing internet shutdown, some reports indicate that the killing are continuing. One doctor reportedly described the crackdown as genocide under digital darkness. So, why do some Iranian activists and commentators feel betrayed by the Western left's response to their struggle for freedom and rights? And what would meaningful solidarity from the Western world look like from your perspective, Ms. Elaine?
They should feel betrayed, and I am absolutely disgusted with the West. I couldn't tell you how disgusted I am. It's, you know, people want to think that this has nothing to do with us. It certainly does. Not only do we have authoritarian personalities, just hopefully not converting to Islam, but you look at the school populations, okay? 20% of them are going to be authoritarian as well. Many of them are going to be advising politicians. And what have we allowed to happen over the last 45 years? Our educational system has been totally infiltrated and basically bought out by characters like, you know, Saudi Arabia and Qatar. And, you know, I'll just speak for a moment about that, because a lot of people don't realize that in 1979, there was also a coup. It just wasn't Iran. There was a coup in Saudi Arabia. And what happened was a group who, like I just mentioned, it says, well, maybe no, that was a group who will fight for the truth. There is another one that every 100 years, that they will be risen up from the community, a group that will that I've actually got that here somewhere. Just let me look for a second. There we go. Allah will raise for this community at the end of every 100 years the one who will renovate its religion for it. That's Dawood 4291. Well, renovate doesn't mean to update your kitchen. Renovate means a factory reset. Okay, so that you go back to the origin, and that is what this group was doing. They were saying, look, we're getting too far away from this. So in Saudi Arabia, they were doing terrible things, not as much as Iran, but my goodness, they had television sets and they were watching Western shows. And there is a group who was very alarmed about this. And of course, the problem with Islam, one of the problems, is that jihad is considered the highest deed. This will take you right straight to paradise, and they all know it, okay? So when you're enforcing, you get the enforcers, the authoritarians who are enforcing the Islam, they've got this bonus not only to be honored in life, but to end up in paradise. And so they get together and they plan together, and they used a funeral procession to bring armaments into the Kaaba. Now, that is not allowed. You're not allowed to have any armaments in there. So the Kaaba police were afraid to try and take action back. You know, they would go to hell if they used, armaments. The military, it was the same way. So the king, and of course, just like Iran, they had a blackout. They had an information blackout. And the news media in the West, they just turned a blind eye to it. But what happened was the king got together with the ulama, okay, which is the Islamic scholars, and said, you got to help me. You got to help me. I got to get the Kaaba back. You know, the police won't go in there and shoot because they figure they'll go to hell. What am I going to do? So now the ulama, they've got the upper hand, and they say, okay, we'll get you a fatwa. But we kind of sympathize with that coup. We kind of sympathize. We don't like these televisions either. All right. So we need to reach an agreement here. And that's exactly what happened. Is the king said, okay, well, we're going to get rid of the televisions. We're going to have a factory reset. And it set back Saudi Arabia decades. Okay. But the other condition was that money from this oil that had recently been discovered would be spent to infiltrate the West, to educate, okay, in the way of Islam. So that's why you go to these universities, and literally billions of dollars has been sent in these universities, thoroughly brainwashing these kids. So they think Islam is a religion of peace, and they don't understand the peace of Islam means and comes only when, as the root of the word shows, you have Islam. The two go together. And they don't understand that. They don't understand truth means what's in the Quran and Hadith. They don't understand any of that. That's not how they're taught. They're just taught that we're all a bunch of Islamophobes and we're raving lunatics and we don't know what we're talking about, and Islam is wonderful. And from Reliance of the Traveler, okay, which is a classic manual of Islamic law, what it says is that personally obligatory knowledge, okay, for Islam, what is best? It is adequate for one to believe in everything brought by the messenger of Allah, Muhammad, and to credit it with absolute conviction, free of any doubt. And what befits the common people and vast majority of those learning or possessing sacred knowledge is to refrain from discussing the subtleties of scholastic theology, lest corruption, difficult to eliminate, find its way into their basic religious convictions. It is better for them to confine themselves to contentment with the above mentioned absolute certainty. So what is that? That's not questioning Islam. You are not supposed to question Islam at all. And several years ago, there was it was an Italian university. Yeah, it was in Italy anyway. I'm pretty sure it was at a university. And they were hosting an event to talk about some world calendar they had put together about different beliefs, you know, like one of those academic exercises they do and spend a lot of money. And they were going to have, and they're useless. They're absolutely useless. And they, people are just too ill-informed. But anyway, one of the speakers was a woman who was supposed to be an expert on the hijab. And I thought, okay, I'm going. I signed up and I went to this event. And this woman went on about the hijab. So you were allowed to ask questions and you had to submit them. And I didn't know if they would read my question out, but they did. And all I did was quote Quran 33:59, which says that the woman must wear the hijab so that she will not be assaulted. That's what it says. Wear the hijab so she will not be assaulted. Now, if you go to the tafsir of Ibn Kathir, the commentary on the Quran, for an explanation of that, there is absolutely no doubt what that means. That is so that you will be known as a free woman, not a slave or a prostitute. That's what it means. So she's supposed to know this. So that's what my question said. It said, this is from the Quran. Would it not be better if in the West, no woman wore a hijab so that they wouldn't know who was available for assault? Because it's a national security risk for some women to be wearing a veil and other women not, if it means that those women who are not can be targeted by people who are coming to your Western country And this has been the norm for hundreds of years for them, okay? And Sharia does not stop at the border. It goes wherever Islam goes. It doesn't recognize borders at all. So they pretend that they are shocked when this thing is happening in Europe now. Well, it was absolutely inevitable. Anyway, so I said to her, wouldn't it be better if no women wore the hijab? Do you know what she said to me, this expert? She says, oh, that's a theological question. I can have someone answer you that if you want to give me your email address. Well, I wasn't about to give her my email address, I can tell you that. But the point is that she wasn't allowed to question it. And there's a perfect example. She has something she's supposed to say. That's all she's supposed to say. And she's not supposed to question it. Can you imagine such a belief that is so that has so much evil in it? You're not allowed to look close. The only people who are allowed to look close are the people who are, the imams. And if any of them question it, like, I don't know if you've heard of Mark Gabriel. He wrote a book. He was an imam at Al-Azhar University. And he's a Christian now, and undercover. You're never going to find him, I don't think. Anyway, he did write a book about it because, he was a professor at Al-Azhar, but he questioned something in the doctrine, and they didn't like that. You're not supposed to question it at all. What kind of an imam are you? What kind of an authoritarian personality are you that you would question Allah? This is ridiculous. They tortured him. They tortured him for weeks. He lost his job. It just broke him. But eventually someone, a woman at a pharmacy took a great, great risk and gave him a Bible. She could see how broken he was. And because, of course, he had memorized everything that was in the Quran, he was able to read like the Gospels and compare Muhammad and Christ side by each. And the woman I was just mentioning, James, she did the same thing when she left Islam, because there is such a difference. And she said the one that really struck her was Mary Magdalene. And what happened with the woman that they were going to stone is that Christ said, who among you without sin, let him cast the first stone. And they all felt ashamed and they left. But what happened with Muhammad? He said, stone her. And just recently in Europe, apparently, basically the west of Austria, and I spent a good deal of time in Austria. I'm just so sad about what's happened there. Is that the west of Austria now is very, very Islamized, and they have an Islamic fair, more or less. And a woman had heard about this particular book. It's in German. I can't get it in English, or I would. And it's called Knowledge for Women. And it's 471 pages. And it's about stoning women, beating women, veiling women, all of that stuff. And it looks very pretty and pink with flowers on it, And it's all about abusing women. And this is being sold publicly. So this woman knew about it, and she went to buy one. And you could actually get it on Amazon in Germany. Anyway, I've seen it yesterday. Anyway, she went and she bought one at one of the stalls, and she wore a hijab that day because it was an Islamic fair and it was all Islamic. But the next day she went back without the hijab to get another copy for a friend. And she also asked if they had Mein Kampf, because it's well known, that among the groups like ISIS, etc., that Mein Kampf is a very popular book. And certainly during the Second World War, Hussein he was at the mosque in Jerusalem. He was a great friend of Hitler and killing the Jews. And he went on long after World War II and had no problem at all. He wasn't part of the Nuremberg trials. Anyway, so she went back to get a second book, and she asked about Mein Kampf as well. Well, they didn't have it, but they said, weren't you here yesterday? They started taking pictures. If you can imagine, you can't even go to a fair, all right? You can't even, because it's so segregated. So they took pictures, they videoed her. The next day, the police show up at her door, and they reported her, okay, for daring to go there, ask for that book twice, and then ask about Mein Kampf. They reported her. So it's, yeah, Europe, Christmas this year, there was such security at their beautiful Christmas markets. Their world famous, beautiful Christmas markets. They had to have security, and some of them were actually canceled owing to the people they've brought into the country that absolutely hate Christianity. That's what, the doctrine teaches. And I'm hogging the conversation. I mean,
No,
really.
that's why we like you, because you give us a lot of very precious information in teaching the West. Divine, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I just like want to talk about when she said, wear the hijab for your safety. So that's give them like the right to just condemn or criticize the woman if she got raped. That will happen in Egypt. We lived in Egypt, and we are aware of what's happening now in Egypt for a long time ago. Not like today, not yesterday, forever. Like whenever, I mean, since I was born, that's what I see in Egypt. If they do something wrong to the woman, it's her fault because she's not wearing hijab.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have like a famous sheikh, like one of like the Muslim, like famous Muslim clerks, who said it's not like the fault of a man if a woman got raped. It's the fault of the woman because she get out of her house without like a man, or if she get out late, or if she's not wearing hijab or something. So they give the green light for any man in Egypt to harass and rape a woman, especially if she's not wearing hijab, and mostly gonna be like Christian, not non-Muslim. This is what's happening now in Egypt. They kidnap our girls, like Christian girls. They enforce them into Islam by applying Islam's teaching to rape the woman. This is okay in Islam, because as like our Jesus said, love your enemy. Islam say rape your enemy. If she's not Muslim, you're allowed to rape her. You can rape her because she is like right hand possessed you. And this is allowed in Quran, in Surah An-Nisa 24. It says that woman is okay for like the right hand possessed to be raped in Islam. Islam is the only religion that allowed the woman to be raped if she's not Muslim, and that's what they do now. At this moment, Egypt pretend to be like following with like the human rights and the international laws of like religion freedom, but they don't do it. There is like I want to like also read something about like one of the researchers in Egypt. This is like this article made by or wrote by Mariam Wahba, and it says an Egyptian court has sentenced Christian researcher Agostino Saman to 5 years of hard labor under Egypt's blasphemy law. Following months of pre-trial detention, Saman, who runs a YouTube channel with more than 100 subscribers, was convicted of contempt of religion and misuse of social media for content defending Christianity. So that's her opinion now. She said the case highlights Cairo's routine use of pre-trial detention as punishment, the discriminatory application of blasphemy law against religious minorities, and the persistent gap between Egypt's religious freedom commitment and its obligations to the United States. Like Egypt.
I just want to explain something. Like the imams in Egypt, and like those they come on TV or come on social media, provoke Christians, insult Christianity, insult Christ.
They said it's a corrupt religion.
Yeah,
and they said bad things about Jesus, and they were not convicted with one day. And
Yeah, and
also
it
Saeed
was
Abu Mustafa. If you want to
also
talk also about Saeed
just a
and about
second, Divine.
Sharif Gaber, the atheist, and other
Divine,
people. Mhm.
Divine, just a second. I just want to say that they provoke Christians by saying false doctrine as if it's Christian doctrine. So
Oh, yeah.
when Christians dare to respond to this and explain what's going on, that's not true, and bring up, provide evidence, they imprison them. The police come and imprison them and leave the imams who provoke them or who agitate the situation free. So that's, which is like unbelievable. You're not even allowed to defend your faith.
Oh,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Mhm.
According to Islam, Job hit his wife. I mean, it's
Yes.
ridiculous. They've completely perverted the teachings in both the Old and New Testament. They say that the Jews follow Ezra in the same way that the Christians follow Christ, and of course that's not true at all either. It's well, heaven forbid they pick up a Bible and see what it actually says. We're going to believe Muhammad, who comes along centuries later and says, "Oh no, it wasn't like that." It's ludicrous. There's no critical thinking involved, but critical thinking is not allowed in Islam. And people who think it can be modernized are absolutely deluding themselves. It is impossible. If you try to modernize it, you're going to get killed. And who is going to approve it? Well, is Allah going to talk to anybody again and say, "Oh yeah, well, okay, we approve your renovation here"? The hadith say the worst things are those that are newly invented, and that every newly invented thing is an innovation, and every innovation is going in astray, and every going astray is in the fire. That's what it says. You cannot modernize Islam. It's impossible. If you took out all of the jihad, if you took out all the zakat funding the jihad, if you took out everything about non-Muslims, you'd have practically nothing left.
Exactly. Divine, would you like to finish your thought?
Yeah, I just want to talk also about other people that were arrested by the government. So the government does not help a Christian when they get killed, or when they get their girls get kidnapped and being raped. But they go after if a Muslim want to convert to Christianity, like Saeed Abu Mustafa in Egypt, he's been in jail for there is no case against him. They just use the pre-trial detention and just renew it once and another and another. They keep just renewing it for him without having him in front of the court or in front of a judge. Why? Because he tried to change his religion on the ID. And imagine, in the first place, that your religion has to be on your ID. I don't see it in any other country but Egypt. Egypt has your religion on your ID, so they can be able to discriminate against you. So when this guy went to to ask, he just had a lawyer to try to. Did you say something?
No, that's Afnan's mic. Finish your thought so we give Afnan a chance to speak.
Yeah, I was just try to mention Saeed, when he tried to change his religion on his ID, and he was arrested and he was accused with false accusation, accuse him of being a terrorist, trying to do a terror inside the country, which has never happened. And this falsification is done by the government itself, not by radical Muslim or other people. But I see now the government and radical people are hand in hand. Even terrorists are aware of what the government is trying to do. Before they do it, the terrorists will know it before them. Someone is escaping Egypt for having crimes, and he should be sentenced, but the officer inside the police station is telling him everything. And before they even arrested a Christian person, they go and tell this terrorist, and he tells people before the Christian get arrested. So it means it's terrible in Egypt now. They put their hands with the terrorists, because the terrorists are Muslim, and they don't give the Christian their rights or equal rights to Muslim. If Muslim is trying to convert to Christianity, he get arrested. If Christian person try to convert to Islam, they would get the certificate, the conversion certificate, in 1 day or 2 days, and who will be done. They can celebrate him for converting from Christianity to Islam. So it's really unfair in Egypt, and it's done by the government. Okay, go
Yes.
ahead, Afnan.
Go ahead, Afnan, if you want to say something.
Yeah, and actually, even about when you were talking about Iranians, I see another thing, them like singing, those people who go out like singing, dancing. It's also showing another side. We will see that the Iranians have begun to rebel against Islam itself, and not just the state, because the state represent Islam itself anyway. And we saw many protesters like playing music and dancing, and this was like I see it as a symbol of resistance against Islam. It's true that many Muslims, they might be like hearing music and everything, but when we go to the Islam itself, that part is like forbidding. Like for Muslim, especially when we go, for example, to the Shia faith, we'll see many hadiths talking about that. And even the Quran itself. For example, there is a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Qasas 28:76 says, "Do not exalt. Indeed, Allah doesn't like the exalted. The exultant." So we see here when we go to when we see the explanation of this verse, many imams and like sheikhs and those, they use this verse to say like dancing is forbidden in Islam. They use it like to classify like dancing is like one of the things that are forbidden because it's make you exalted. So this is one of the things. The other thing also, when we go to the Shia books, for example, one of them is hadith from Imam Ja'far as-Siddiq. He's from the book from Wasail al-Shia. He said, Imam Ja'far as-Siddiq, he said, Ghina, which is singing by musical instruments, is among the things for which Allah has promised hellfire. So we see like even the music is something referred to hell for Muslims. Imagine while the real God in the Bible, he asked us to clap. He said, "Clap your hands, all you people, shout to the God with loud songs of exulting." So we see the different here. The second part, we see like the Shia government killing people just by like when they say we don't agree with that, or like showing like giving their opinions, like it's their free like it's supposed to be their freedom to give their opinion, but they're not allowed to do that. Why? Because even in the Shia belief faith, it's just like the Sunni. Why? We'll go, for example, to Al-Kafi, the book of Al-Kafi, vol number 8. He said, Shaykh al-Kulaini, whoever doesn't obey the Imam or the wali of the Muslims. The wali of Muslims, we can say like the president, the highest authority on the state of Muslims. So after accepting Islam, his blood is lawful to be shed, his property is unlawful, and he is the category of those who have turned away from the covenants of Allah. So that's also something Islam given them. Like no one under Islamic Sharia law has the right to say no to the leader or ask for his right. If he did so, like the high leader, he has the right to kill him, even if he is the one who is wrong and that person is just trying to defend himself. Yeah.
Exactly, which they call actually the songs are the songs of the devil. That's what they say. So Miss Elaine mentioned this last time she talked. So she said, so I would like to ask today, the left is actively influencing youth in Western universities, rewriting history to blame Christianity to nearly every wrongdoing and portraying it as the villain of history. For example, they usually just started at the history, like in from history, they start from 1095, when Pope Urban called the First Crusade, and because it's, as you know, it's power play. I've often quoted John Spacito, the a professor in Georgetown University, and that's how he presented. And he says, literally 5 centuries of peace, which is like what he called peace is burning churches, raping nuns, killing pilgrims. He called that peace between Muslims and Christians. Went by until 1095 when Pope Urban called for the First Crusade. So the quick summary and background is that when Muhammad dies in 632, 1 century later, in 732, his followers, the Muslims, had conquered 2/3, or let's say close to 3/4 of Christian world. That's the peaceful guys. That's the peaceful. The peace was between the Christian and Muslim, which again people are unaware was mostly centered in what we today call the Middle East. It was in North Africa from Morocco to Egypt, and it was in the Middle East, Greater Syria, and all that nations in that region, and also, of course, Asia Minor and what we call Turkey today. That was the heart of the Christian world, while people today think Christianity was always only in Europe. It is bad enough that large parts of Christian history have been deliberately suppressed and demonized, while Islamic history has been treated as exactly the opposite way. But we have now gone far beyond mere ignorance. What we are witnessing is outright twisted, indeed backward logic. A
Well,
religion. Uh, just let me finish this
Mm,
so you
sorry.
can elaborate in the end. A religion and civilization that has historically oppressed women and ironically continues to do so in prison days, as anyone can plainly see, like killing women in Iran and who's not wearing hijab correctly, is somehow portrayed by the left as refined, benevolent, and even favorable toward women. Meanwhile, Christianity, the civilization that more than any other established monogamy, elevated dignity of women and restrained male power, is recast as the evil misogynist faith, or misogynistic faith. They even portray the Baltic Crusade as nothing more than evil Christians attacking innocent, peaceful Baltic pagans who supposedly had done nothing wrong. What is conveniently erased is the long record of systematic persecution that came before it. The murder of Christians, missionaries, repeated killing of Christians community, the brutal enslavement of Christians, including the capture of and sale of young Christian women to Muslim markets for enormous profit. This is not history. It is deliberate historical inversion designed to turn aggressors into victims and victims into villains. The inversion of reality is precisely the danger of manufactured fake history. it is what I have been confronting and exposing actually for decades, since like 2004, and sorry, since 2000, and I'm like trying to expose this. So we want to understand, why is the left trying to reshape historical narrative, and what political or ideological goals are served by doing so? Miss Elaine.
I'm always in danger of forgetting what it was I was going to talk about.
It was too long a
it
question,
was
eh?
your mention of the Crusades. Well, several things you mentioned. But not too long ago, I wrote an article about the massacres in Nigeria. And of course, I quoted the doctrine because I always connect the events to the doctrine. And I realize people watching this channel are very familiar with the doctrine, and we can just have a conversation. But when I write, I include the doctrine so that people can make that connection. You know, it's not just a dusty book somewhere. So I had included the doctrine that supports what is happening in Nigeria with the slaughter of the Christians there. And there was a comment under that post, and it was from, I am sorry to say, a Canadian security professional. Okay. I have absolutely no confidence in Canada's national security, or pretty much national security anywhere, because they are heavily infiltrated because of their lack of knowledge about Islam, and they will believe basically whatever they're told, you know. And it's happening with the RCMP as well. It's happening in the United States as well. So this former Canadian counter-terrorist person attacked me in a comment. He called me a crusader and a liar, and that I was making war on Allah. Can you imagine? He is supposed to be Canadian, intelligence, counterterrorism. And who is he attacking? Who is he supporting? Certainly not our Constitution. Our Constitution does not say it's okay to go slaughter Christians just because they're Christians. And when I put the actual evidence there, he ignores that altogether, doesn't mention it. And that's what I come up against all the time, because I am frequently having outreach from counter-terrorists around the world, and I will go look at their profile, and I can quickly identify the doublespeak, which I'm sure you can as well, when peace doesn't mean peace, and I can identify what they're saying, and I block them, because I know full well that these are not people who have got the West's interests at heart. But most people cannot do that. And you try to tell them, and they just don't want to believe it, because they've been totally brainwashed. They've been going to all this dawa, and it's the same with the left. They've had decades now of education. We're talking about a couple of generations who have been, getting these huge grants from the Middle East, who are telling them that Islam is just wonderful. And, you can't blame the Muslims who aren't informed. They're constantly told how wonderful Islam is and how terrible the West is. Well, if you're told that from the time you're born, and if you look at what they're taught, like I've got a couple books here. Let me see. Yeah, this one here, okay, is a high school book for Muslim students, and it covers the last 30 surah in the Quran. The last 30. There's only 2 verses in the last 30 that come from Medina. So they're given the view, the perspective of Islam as a wonderful thing. It does say, Quran 98:6, that, kafirs are the worst creatures. And what's the other one it's got in here? Did I mark it? No, I didn't. But anyway, it's only got 2 verses from Medina. Well, they know we're the worst of creatures. It doesn't say to kill them. So that's what they're studying. So then they want to believe that the people who go out and murder, like at Bondi Beach, how is that different from Iran? It's not. And it's happening in Australia, because the doctrine doesn't recognize borders, and the people who are committed to it are going to follow it. They're going to go to New York and they're going to shoot or stab Salman Rushdie because 30 years ago, some preacher said that they should do that. But that's what the imams are, is that they are enforcers of Sharia. And this book here, okay, How to Tell Others About Islam, the back of it is full of lies. It says, is there any violence? Is there any violence in the Quran? Well, I don't know if you can see that. I've got an X next to it there. And then the next page, I've got nothing but X's. And because I know the doctrine, you know the doctrine, we could argue all of these and prove them to be lies in 2 minutes. But your average person reads this, it's given to them, you know, the person's smiling, they say this is true, they believe it. It's not true. And the thing is that whereas people like you and I were policed, okay, there's a wonderful Jewish man, Dr. Anthony Bostom. He wrote a book called The Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism. It was on Amazon for years. It has now been taken down, okay? It's been discontinued on Amazon. How is he going to sell this book? How are people going to learn about Islam and Judaism and the hatred that the doctrine teaches for the Jews if they're not allowed to read the book? And the same with Easy Meat, the book that Peter McLaughlin wrote about the little girls in England and the grooming gangs. That was published in 2014. And then in 2025, your elected officials in the UK say they know nothing about it. Well, Amazon delisted that book in 2019, so people aren't allowed to know about it. So that is what the left is doing. AI is being programmed that way. The filtering, you know, whether it's LinkedIn or it's YouTube or it's national media, certainly, you know, the BBC, it's terrible. Thousands and thousands of people on the street in Iran, and they're saying that there's a few hundred, and you can see for yourself, there's hundreds of thousands. And not only that, it's not about the economy. Certainly that's bad. Certainly people are stressed. Of course they are. But they, at last count, there was about 250 mosques had been destroyed, and they're burning those Qurans and Islamic centers because they're tired of not being allowed to dance, not being allowed to sing, not being allowed to see a smile or feel the wind in their hair. How can you live like that? I mean, why would God make creatures to live under a tent, to be beaten? This is ridiculous. It defies common sense. It defies humanity. If you have a heart, how can you believe this? But a lot of Muslims don't even know what their own doctrine says. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And also about, you know, vulnerable targets, you know, like to us, there is no honor in, like, you know, killing a baby, in beating a woman. You know, pick on somebody your own size. That's what I would say. I think it's a disgrace to attack people who are weaker than you are. It just makes you a bully. It doesn't
Actually,
make
that's
you
their targets. Their targets.
that is exactly because that was Muhammad's targets. You know, it's like when he goes to Khaybar. Oh, yay! You know, Allahu Akbar. Muhammad. You know, he listens for the adhan, and if he doesn't hear it in the morning, he attacks. And then people, they come out with their spades and their shovels. They're going to the fields to work. He attacks them. Well, it's the same thing at Bondi Beach. It's the same thing in Iran. You know, the people are unarmed. They want to take your armaments. Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, you know, the U.S. Constitution, it has the Second Amendment because it knows very well that when America was born, unlike most countries, okay, it was born by overthrowing a government, and that government was armed, and that's why they put in their Constitution.
By the Minutemen.
The government you need to worry about, not your next door neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. By the Minutemen, we did the revolution. We freed America by the Minutemen, who actually owned guns. The farmers, ordinary farmers. But I mean, don't you think this is laughable when he tried to insult you by calling you crusade? As we are the Middle Eastern Christians. Literally, when we saw the Crusades, the first Crusade arrived to Jerusalem, we literally fell on their feet and kissed them because they came to our aid. They were our saviors. They came. You have a church today in Jerusalem. Guess why? Because of crusades. So Muslims came and destroyed the Sepulchre Church, everything, destroyed all our churches, and the Crusades came and rebuilt it. And saved us from killing and raping, and then you want to call Crusades as insult. I don't
Well,
understand it.
you know, I was at a lecture one time, and it was being given by a counterterrorist in the United States, and she had gone through this whole lecture, half an hour, and had not said one word. You know, she's talking about terrorism. Well, the highest number of terrorist groups, okay, in any Western country are always Islamic, because they're funded through jihad, or the jihad is funded through zakat. Of course, there's money. It's in the doctrine. This is what they're supposed to be doing. So it's, of course, 80-90%. And yet she had gone through a whole half-hour lecture about counterterrorism, and not only never mentioned jihad or Islam, if you can believe it, and she's a Jew, never mentioned Jews. So you could comment at the end, and I said, it's like, you haven't mentioned Islam, and the core doctrine is hateful towards Jews. It's extremely anti-Semitic. It's more anti-Semitic than Mein Kampf, and it wasn't mentioned. So then a Muslim, she kind of gave some kind of an answer. Oh well, and then a Muslim put up his hand, and unfortunately it was the end, so he got the last word, and he says, oh well, there was the Charter of Medina, and that was such a wonderful example of cooperation between Jews and Muslims. That's an absolute lie. But you got a whole group of people there who hear this as the last word, but it's a total lie. The Charter of Medina, okay, was all for Muhammad's benefit, that any disputes had to be taken to him. He was the final arbiter. And in 5 years, there was not a Jew left in town. They were all either exiled or killed. And yet he brings that as a wonderful example. And you hear that all the time. And they teach that in the schools. I've heard that at university seminars where they have said, oh, well, the Charter of Medina was wonderful. And the last sermon of Muhammad, there was no difference between black and white. Oh, they believe absolute BS. I'm sorry, but they do. And that brings us to, how is this happening? Well, look at what the EU has done now. They've put $20 million into this Quran project. And it's an exhibition. It's going all around Europe to show how important the Quran was to the development of Europe as you see it today. It's an absolute fabrication. And they've also got displays about the myth of the hijab. And you've got the liberals there, and you've got the moderate Muslims there, and everybody's telling a different story. And yet, if you go to an Islamic market and you buy a book, what's it going to say? It's going to say you can stone women, you can beat them, and they just pretend this isn't happening. But the Europeans are helping to pay. Well, we're all doing it. All of our governments are doing. They're facilitating the advance of Sharia, a rapid advance of Sharia. They're helping it all the way. They're treating it as a private belief when it is no such thing. It is an adversarial system of governance, and they're very foolish.
I just want to mention also, like, the irony of this, like in Dearborn, in here in the U.S., they in Michigan, they said that the Muslims, the left is the new sword of Islam. So they use the left to vote for them, and got them the mayor is Muslim and stuff. And then we find when the left tried to do Pride Parade, they shut them down. The Muslims shut them down. It's like, no, you cannot have a Pride Parade here. It's so funny. They are so stupid, useful idiots to the Muslims, and the Muslims use them as their sword against themselves, and the idiots taking it. Divine, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I just want to add something about like all the corrupt cities and states are either like left or Muslims or both. Like what we see in Minnesota, what we see in from the Somali community, they all have one thing in common, which is they're all Muslim. they all like follow Islam. Islam is about like lying and manipulation. Like as Eileen said, like the guy was just talking about wrong information about Muhammad being in Medina, and then he kicked everybody. Like he was running away from Mecca, and once he went to the Medina and they met him and they let him be there, let him like claim to be a prophet, no one like approached him or no one attacked him. He's the one who attacked everybody, and he said either to be a Muslim or be out of the Medina. So they lie and lie and lie. And also the part about like the crusade, like how many years after the invasion and the aggression of the Islam against Christianity, against Hindus, against Buddhism, against all other religion, then the crusade showed up or came to like just like to defend this the land, to take the land back, the Jerusalem back. So this was like a defensive act. It wasn't like attacking or like initiating like the attack or the aggression. No, they were like trying to get back their lands. But Muslims only talk about like the Crusader, what they did. Oh, they're like the wars on Islam or Muslims. They don't tell the truth. They don't tell that this is after 400 years of the aggression of Islam and like raping people, killing people everywhere. Whenever like they get into a country, they just kill randomly, just to take like the place or to invade this land. So they just look with one eye. That's what I wanted to say.
I just want to mention one more thing about what I was saying about Europe, because, you know, I had a conversation with a good friend there yesterday, and she was saying what I also believe, and that is that moderate Islam, so-called moderate Islam, is in fact the most dangerous. And this is the Trojan horse. This is people who may be sincere and may not be sincere. They may just want to believe that Islam is a religion of peace, and they're defining it in a Western way instead of in the true Islamic way. But it is the most dangerous because these are the people who are leading our organizations, associations, our politicians, and they're either in denial or it is straight up taqiya, and they are presenting a very a polished view of Islam as being something that it is not. They are totally leaving out where it leads. And an example is something, it's called the Erasmus Project. And this is now happening in the EU. And for decades, this wonderful project, a student exchange project, has gone on. So for Europeans, okay, so that Dutch would learn more about the Swedish would learn more about the Swiss would learn more about the Italians. It was purely European, and they all had individual, distinct, beautiful cultures. So that this program has now been expanded, and I can tell you this is an absolute travesty, and it is extremely dangerous. I remember years ago there, when I was going to university, they decided in their wisdom, the board at the university, that they were going to be very liberal. And there was a halfway house that had someone in it who was wanting to get his degree. And this is someone who had been accused of murder and rape and had been sentenced to 10 years. Well, this person was given permission to attend a university where there were a lot of very vulnerable, very naive young people, and he raped 2 of them. And of course, eventually they caught him, and this is when I was going to university, so I'm very well aware of it. They caught him and he went back to jail. But that's some liberal sitting in a nice, comfortable office somewhere going, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do that? And not thinking about the outcome, about the vulnerable, naive people who are going to be taken advantage of. And that's exactly what's happening now. You know, this Erasmus Project has been extended to Syria and Morocco and all of these Islamic countries who are now going to be going on student exchanges to Europe. And not only that, when they get there, they're going to apply for asylum. They're going to, and this is just another way, frankly, to get in those extra employees that they want to get in at perhaps a lower rate. So frankly, I think there's a lot of avarice behind this. You know, one of the 7 deadlies is that people are not only naive, they believe what they want to believe. They're thinking they might make a profit, or they might, polish their halo a little bit. Aren't I a good person? Well, it's not good. And anyone who dares to call people like you and I an Islamophobe or anything else, they have no idea what they are talking about, because we are the people who care about human rights and about people having freedom and being able to live their lives the way they were intended to live, and not under the boot of Sharia. So I've really said too much today, but
No, that's actually great. Actually, our time is ended, but we have to talk next time about the OIDAC report, human rights report about the Christian persecution in Europe. So next time that would be our our type, our subject. Would you like to say something, Divine?
No, I just want to say Christian persecution is all over the world, not just in Europe or the Middle East. It's everywhere. So we have to handle that too. We have to talk about it and be clear about it.
The thing is, we go to the West to help us, the Middle Eastern Christians, from persecution. And when we find this
now we have no place
in the West, we have nowhere to turn. So that's the problem.
Exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that's why we have to talk about it, because it's disastrous what's happening.
And it's the vulnerable who suffer first, like the little children going to school now who are attacked simply because they're blonde. They're called terrible names because they're kafirs. Okay, they're being attacked in their own countries at school, and the authorities are not doing anything about it. It's appalling.
They also convert them to Islam without,
and that's happening as well.
Know.
Yeah,
they do a lot of bad things, and if you are trying to expose them, you are the Islamophobic. Not them.
Sign me up for Islamophobia then. It's Islam. Islam is my target. And, when people try to pretend it's something that it's not, that you're going after Muslims, that's not the case at all. None of us are doing that. We're going after a doctrine and what that doctrine teaches and how it manifests itself in real life. And it comes from the doctrine.
Yes,
exactly. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Elaine. Thank you, Divine and Afnan. And we're waiting for you next time. We have to talk about this report. Thank you so much.
All right. Send me a copy. I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Sure, I will.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.